Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the Board of Selectmen's meeting for February 18th, 2015. We're going to call to order and then begin tonight with a moment of silence for Paul Kelly. Paul's a former director of the member of the Board of Directors of the Council on Aging for 16 years. He served as the chair of the Board of Directors at the Council on Aging for the past 10 years. He was a longtime volunteer and very supportive of the seniors and all of the programs at the Council on Aging. And he's going to be very missed by Mary Ann Sullivan, by the staff at the COA, by all of the friends and the seniors who go to the COA. So we're going to have a moment of silence in memory of Paul Kelly. Thank you. First item on our agenda is to confirm our future meeting dates. And we're scheduled to meet next Tuesday, the 24th. We also have a meeting of the Warrant Committee scheduled for the 25th. And then we should probably all come up with check our schedules for March and let Paula know what our availability is, and then maybe we can...
Is there any tentative dates as of now?
Do we have any hearings scheduled, Paula, or anything, conduit hearings or anything like that?
I just can't do March 4th.
So maybe we should start with the second week in March.
Tuesday is the 3rd. Does that work?
I may be out of town that first week in March, Madam Chair. For
How about March 10th, the following Tuesday?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, and then why don't we, next Tuesday, why don't we all check our availability for the rest of March and then figure out the rest of the dates next week?
Okay.
Okay, we have approval of current payroll and vendor warrants.
Move approval of current payroll and vendor warrants.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Citizen Speak. Do we have anyone tonight who'd like to address the board at Citizen Speak? We have quite a few. So why don't we start with Mr. Sweeney, and we'll go around the room this way, through the front row and then the back row. Good evening, Bob.
Good evening, Mrs. Conlon, Mr. Early, Mr. Cohane, Ms. Fagan, and Ms. Rizzi. I'm here tonight because I know that in executive session you're going to be discussing the town farm, and I spent three years as co-chair of the Governor Stoughton Land Trust Committee, 3 years as a member of the Governor Stoughton Trustees, and I'm here tonight as a neighbor in the capacity of president of the Indian Cliffs Association. And as everyone knows, Pulte has plans to purchase 30 of the 34 acres on the town farm for a 23-lot cluster development. And it's imperative that the purchase and sale agreement that was signed on October the 26th, 2011, after countless hours of negotiation between the parties, that it be strictly adhered to, and of course it was subsequently approved in the courts. The concern that I have is that Pulte has now come up with a development plan that is simply not a good plan because it does not meet the terms and the conditions of the purchase and sale agreement. And I want to give a specific example. The P&S includes language that Pulte states, and I'm going to quote them, and this language was put in as Plan C. It was put in there at my request by Town Council Flynn on Rider B. In the purchase and sale agreement, Pulte states, and the big concern right now has to do with the buffer zone. Pulte states that we will maintain 100-foot buffers at a minimum from existing residential neighborhoods. We will create a plan that is sensitive to the immediate environment and strives to maximize open space while respecting the natural topography, wetlands, and overall vegetation of the site. It was my understanding as a trustee at the time and as someone who participated in those negotiations that when Pulte states that they're going to maintain a 100-foot buffer zone, my interpretation of that clearly, crystal clear, is that it's a 100-foot wooded area that separates the Indian Cliffs neighborhood from the new development. However, Pulte has now come up with what it calls its 100-foot buffer zone, and they're calling it a compliance plan, and it is anything but compliant. Under the proposal that I received a copy of, Pulte effectively, and I'm sure you've probably seen this, Pulte effectively reduces the 100-foot agreement to 30 feet. That's outrageous. And in their buffer zone, they're basically running their buffer zone 100 foot into the new house's backyard. So they're saying that it's okay to have a buffer zone with somebody's green grass backyard and have a buffer zone with a swimming pool in it. I don't think that is acceptable. And what I'm asking the trustees to do, I guess basically, is to tell Pulte that they need to comply with what was agreed to. A deal is a deal, and that language of the P&S is contractually binding on the parties. And they can't change the terms. They can't eliminate a 70-foot of a 100-foot buffer. Even if it's financially feasible for them. A deal's a deal. I don't think that they should be allowed to give this town a snow job, and I do think that they should be told by the trustees that they need to come back. We're dealing with a historic property. They need to come back with a plan that meets the terms and the conditions of the P&S. And on behalf of the Indian Cliffs neighborhood, I would appreciate the support of the trustees in making sure that Pulte carries out its obligations under the contract. And I also think that it would be very wise on Pulte's part. They had Mark Camo was the land acquisition officer. Now I think Mark Mastriani is their project manager. It only makes sense that with such a big development that they should have contact with the neighbors. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Bob.
Mr. Sweeney. Who's next? Cheryl, and then Dr. Shea. Good evening, Cheryl.
Hi.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Dennis. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Cheryl.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Paula. Amy Rock Dodge. Thank you for letting me speak this evening, and I have paperwork that I'll give you all after I'm done. You know, I've lived in my house for 51 years. I've been driving for 40 years.
Cheryl, just for the record, I forgot to ask, could you state your address?
Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl Flightman, Crown Street, Milton. I'm also an elected town meeting member of Precinct 1
Thank you.
and president of the Tucker Neighborhood Association. So, I've been driving in the town for 40 years, and I understand that right now we have a monumental amount of snow and limited equipment and manpower. However, in my opinion, the bigger problem is we have a DPW director who's untruthful, vindictive, and untrustworthy. I feel badly for the people who work for him and are overworked and underappreciated. I have never...
Ms. Flamer, we're not going to entertain personal attacks on the character of any employee
Okay,
or
but
any
I
official, so-
still need to go through this. This is important,
If you
Katie.
do have-
This is citizen speak,
Cheryl,
and I'm speaking.
just a minute, please. If you have points that you want to make about the storm cleanup or about the operations of the DPW, if there's a complaint, you can make that, but we're not going to have personal attacks on anyone.
Okay? However, I will preface that by saying I've been making complaints and emails and texts all week, and this is what led up to this, so please let me finish. I live on Crown Street, which has a very steep hill on it. Not once this season have I seen a plow on the street. In the past, plows have gone by many times after a storm, not this winter. This pattern of deplorable service began as soon as the storm started. The first problem was with Essex Road, which runs between Blue Hill Terrace through to Crown and down to Decker. Essex Road was unpassable for 3 to 4 days from the terrace down to Crown. Despite contacting Dennis, who was trying to help, I left a voicemail for Joe stating I'm a town meeting member and a president of the Neighborhood Association, which includes Essex Road. Nothing happened. I was then at the Citizen Speak at the next Selectmen's meeting, and the Safety Committee was reporting. So Joe, Chief Wells, and Chief Grant was here. Joe Lynch said he never heard about the Essex Road problem. I have copies of emails sent by Carolyn Cahill to him, and I was copied, who lives on Essex. Last week, before the current storm, I got stuck on Crown Street when turning onto it from Blue Hill Terrace. I've never gotten stuck there before, and I have a good car. I tried to call Dennis, he didn't answer. I called Anne Marie, and I was just screaming at her, which was totally inappropriate. Anne Marie said she'd call Joe immediately. She also offered to come help me. Imagine that, I was stuck, and little Anne Marie was going to come help me. Anyway, I had gone out to do some errands, and I texted her, and she said Joe never called her back. Luckily, when I got back an hour and a half later, the street had been plowed. However, the current problem is this storm. Crown Street has been plowed once and has not been salted or sanded. I've made multiple calls, emails, and texts to no avail. I have a litany of them that I will share with this board tonight and then give you copies. The end result being the street is barely passable. We had a Comcast service person coming to our house yesterday. He called me to tell me he couldn't get up Crown Street. I had to explain to him how to go back out to 138 and Blue Hill Avenue, come down Blue Hill Terrace, and take the left onto Crown. The street's also impassable from the Baptist Church parking lot because you can't get any momentum up the hill. Just to move through it. Dennis has been desperately trying to help. Nothing has happened. It's funny, I left a message for both of you last night, didn't hear back from either of you either.
Excuse me, Cheryl, I did not receive a message from you last night, so I'm not going to, we don't usually respond at Citizen Speak, but I'm not going to let that go by. I did not receive a
But
message
I did
from
leave you a message. I left both of you a
Well,
message.
I did not receive one at my work or at my home,
Okay.
or on my cell phone.
Okay. Well, I feel it's time for the Board of Selectmen to take a strong stand about this. Something needs to be done. In the past 2 days, I've been told by several very high-ranking town officials that they know that untruths are being told. And of course, I'm not going to give you their names or their positions. And I'm not going to go into the rest of this, but I am going to read you some of these
Okay,
messages.
Cheryl, you're up over 3 minutes now,
I
so I'd ask you to
understand.
please be quick, because we
I
have a
will.
lot of people here tonight, and we have a pretty full agenda. And I think we get the message that you're
Okay, well, then I'm going to
giving us
read you
tonight.
the email that Joe Lynch sent me today. And you see those pictures I gave all of you? Those were taken on Monday at 4 p.m. I left Joe a pretty nasty voicemail this morning because nothing's been done. I got your voicemail message this morning. If you had delivered a threat to me in person rather than leaving it on a voicemail, I would have called the police and had you removed from the property. Be clear, your reports are inaccurate, a downright lie. Your road has been plowed several times during Saturday and Sunday. Any statement that the road has not been plowed is absurd, as you have had about 22.6 inches of snow on it. On Sunday evening, I personally traversed Blue Hill Terrace, Crown, Essex, and Decker Street. I drove all of these streets in a Ford Fusion sedan in both directions. The roads were not perfect, but they were safe, passable, and accessible to fire apparatus. I never told anybody that Crown Street would be plowed again. Crown Street is not anywhere near the high prioritization where fire access is impassable. Whoever told you that it would be plowed, Dennis told me, he told Anne Marie it would be plowed, was not speaking on behalf of the DPW, nor with any knowledge of ongoing emergency operations with MEMA and out-of-state relief support teams. I understand and more than share your frustration. Please keep everything in perspective and understand that any lack of presence on your street is only the result of others beside yourself suffering a more drastic emergency issue. And you can all have copies of all the messages. Pass that down, Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Dr. Shea is next.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr.
Richard Shea, Precinct 9, taxpayer, town meeting member. Taxpayer especially. I'm here voice my concern with regard to the 15th subject that you're going to be discussing tonight. Having voted at town meeting and listened to the selectmen change the wording of Article 15, I don't understand how the selectmen can be involved with the access deeding rights to the contractor who's interested in building the 40B on Randolph Ave. So I don't understand. Naturally, I'm going to have to wait and see what is said, but I know that the selectmen do not have the power to give right away to any developer. At least that's how I understood the article, and I believe that was the intent of the selectmen when they changed the article and removed some of the words. I'm also concerned with if they are requesting access through the DPW yard, which is owned by the taxpayers. I think the taxpayers or town meeting should be involved with that. Just giving my opinion, I think that is true. I don't think that it's a selectman decision. I know I watched a selectmen's meeting a couple of months ago where all three of the present select people were giving reasons why they didn't like what was presented to the town from the 40B developer. And I think it was Madam Chairman who said they also don't have an access road to their development. And immediately you were interrupted by someone who said, oh, we can give them access through the DPW yard, which I thought that was really a bad statement to say. And if it was said at a law firm or an accounting firm or a big business firm, that person would be out. You don't interrupt people who are presenting an opinion to the general public, to the taxpayers. My second aspect on this is I was concerned about the appeal by the Board of Appeals not filing an appeal based on the recommendation of the select people. I try to anticipate what your response is going to be, and I'd like to answer, and just anticipating. An appeal doesn't, you can withdraw an appeal at any time, but an appeal gives those that are interested in looking into the matter time with private lawyers to look into the matter and see if, in fact, it could hold. The appeal could hold. And if it couldn't, then you withdraw the appeal. It wasn't going to cost the town 1 penny. And I didn't understand why the select people voted to not to support the appeal. I also think by law that if the Board of Appeals voted to appeal, that the selectmen have to support them financially. I could be wrong on that, but I think that is true. But we weren't interested in having the town spend a single penny. And the present lawyer that the taxpayers have hired has requested some information from the town and called me and said he was kind of upset the fact that it's been about 3 weeks since he asked a member of the town for some information. Now, maybe that was mailed today. I don't know. It wasn't the town administrator that he asked the information from. I saw you look at her. She's nor did he ask it of you, but he's going to now have to go freedom of information. I mean, that's not necessary. And my last comment is, I was disappointed that the vote to not to appeal was done in secretive, or executive session, as you call it. I think everybody has a right to know who voted and why, why. I think that's just a right for all taxpayers. The school parents are going to have more people in the classrooms, that's for sure, when this goes through. Absolutely. And it's going to go through at some time and at some degree. But there's going to be a lot of people upset. Slowly but surely it's going to be seen. And we should know who's with us and who isn't with us on this piece. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your listening. But
Thank you, Dr. Shea.
I am concerned about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Who else? There were people in the back row for citizen speak. Oh, and then we have Diane. Okay, we'll come to you, Diane, after we have Mr. Keating and Mr. Bennett. Good evening.
Bill, Kevin,
You could both just give your names and addresses for the record.
Kevin Keating, 28 Harlan Street, Milton, Precinct 5, Town Meeting Member.
Bill Bennett, 37 Westfield Road, Precinct 6, Town Meeting Member.
Good evening.
Good evening. I am the chair of the Milton Youth Hockey Yule and Rink Committee, and I am a Milton Youth Hockey Board member. I'm here to speak to agenda number 10 regarding a discussion about increasing ice fees at the Yule and Rink. Dennis Cohane was kind enough to inform one of our Milton Youth Hockey Board members about this Board of Selectmen agenda item. To recap a little history, on June 23rd, 2010, over 4 years ago, the town of Milton received an award notice from the Department of Conservation and Recreation, aka DCR, awarding a permit agreement to the town of Milton for the Yule and Rink. Milton Youth Hockey is the #1 user of the rink. Yet the town of Milton Selectmen, nor any other town official, has initiated a conversation with Milton Youth Hockey regarding the Yule and Rink. In June, last June 2014, Milton Youth Hockey, at our request, had a meeting with Tom Hurley, Bill Clark, and Anne Marie Fagan. The topic of that meeting was the future of the Yule and Rink. As the majority user of the rink, Milton Youth Hockey made it known that we felt that we should have a seat at the table as far as the future of the rink is concerned. As we had explained, our primary concern is to protect the 1,000 members that are involved in the Milton Youth Hockey. Specifically, we are focused on maintaining or increasing available ice hours, keeping ice costs as low as possible, and maximizing public skating opportunities. This rink exists for the benefit of the town, and Milton Youth Hockey shares that goal. At the June 2014 meeting, we had requested to be kept involved in ongoing Yule discussions, and we were told that we would be included in those discussions. Since then, we have received no correspondence, and the town's Yule Rink contract expires in a few months. Milton Youth Hockey determines their budget in February and March for the season that begins in late August. Based on that budget, which includes the hourly ice fees at the Yule and Rink, we determine what the price of the program will be for our members. The idea of having a discussion about increasing hourly fees at the Yule in the middle of the season and beyond is disturbing. Increasing hourly fees at the Yule and Rink in the middle of the season or beyond would have detrimental effects on the program and its members. I would also suggest that any discussion to increase the hourly rate for next year should occur after the town of Milton has secured an extension for the lease of the Yule and after Milton Youth Hockey is included in the discussion. The town administrator has informed us that the town of Milton has not officially received an extension from DCR. It would not seem prudent to vote on increasing hourly ice charges before an extension is granted and before the voices of the children of Milton are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I'm actually here for the same reason. I am also a member of the Board of Directors, and I'm wondering why Curry has chosen this particular point in time to request a $25 increase.
Let's put that straight. Curry is not. This is the Selectmen. We have something in front of us. DCR put out a memo on January 6th saying the rates could be increased effective as of that point. We are here to discuss whether we want to do anything with that or not.
Okay, so bringing
And
that...
Curry has nothing to do with that.
So why would the Selectmen at this point in time want to bring a rate increase forward?
We're not saying we want to.
We are going to discuss it, and we're going to need to get, Tom's been devoted a lot of time to this Yule and Rink, so we're going to get an update for the board and have a discussion on it, but let's It was important to correct something if it was wrong, but let's let
I'm
Mr.
all
Bennett
set.
finish, and then we'll go
Okay,
on.
but it was not, Curry had nothing to do with it.
Okay, Tom.
And Curry is really getting tired, really getting tired of being trashed.
We're getting tired of being trashed by Curry, Tom.
Okay, I think we should hold the rest of the discussion among the board until our agenda item, but Mr. Bennett, if
I'm
you want.
fine. That's all set.
Okay, nothing else?
Thank you,
Thank
Thank you
you.
both.
Dennis.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, we had, Mrs. Agostino was next. And I don't know if anyone else had their hand up, but if so, please come up after, okay.
Good evening.
Good evening, Diane.
Is this a record to have so many former select
Might be.
people in the room? First of all, I would like to start out with a compliment, because I'm sure there are more complaints than compliments going around these days. The Selectmen's office with the town administrator and the personnel is just exemplary. You can call no matter what's going on, and they will get back to you, which, you know, is just wonderful, especially since you're on overload these days. I'm here to address a few issues that you may or not be able to help with, but as the Board of Selectmen that oversees so many different departments that are involved in what's going on, I wanted to just review them. And I'm looking at it as a viewpoint from the snow of 2015, which is what I've labeled it, versus the blizzard of '78. It was so much easier to actually just have the road shut down and be stuck at home for a week. It may not have been safer, and we might have lost a lot of money with the commercial ventures, but, not safer because you couldn't get out of your house if there was a fire, that aspect of it. But overall, it really gave the departments that needed to get into gear and really clean the roads out, the free rein. I know there's other issues with equipment, and I would love if the town would, after this is all over someday, when the tulips are blooming, have pretty much a town-wide open hearing and let everybody either gripe or have all the department heads there, order pizza, and actually, because that's what needs to be done. But for now, I want to address that there's an incredible number of people on social media, and they've had their growing pains over the last, I'd say, few months. But the emergency situation really seems to have pulled people together. And the technology, I'm on the older scale. I'm actually a senior citizen now. And to connect with some of these young people who got trained in IT has just been phenomenal. But it has its limitations. The Facebook, the pages, the private messaging, it was just getting overwhelming for every Facebook page. And so what I wanted to try to focus on, and I've pulled some of the different groups together, is using this new technology that they've discussed, which is, and it was recommended by the church next door, which is a website that can actually list all the different options, the different Facebook pages or the different, there were just many different groups, carpooling things, because what we have, and we're getting calls constantly, it's almost like, how can you not help these people? The elderly, the sick, the disabled, the single, or the pregnant parents. I had one contact, and it was just through a computer, never met the person, where he wanted to go shovel. He's a National Guardsman. He said, I need to go shovel, but I have a 2-year-old, and my wife's just had a baby in the hospital. So what we're trying to do is help you guys by helping some of the people that you can't just, we don't have that type of service in the town of Milton to connect volunteers. And you also have the liability concern that you have to be careful about. So it would be a closed group, and we're going to share that information with you. But I would like to ask if on your technology usage, the town's website, as well as each of the department pages, what some of the pages have done, and I'm not the tech person, I'm just learning from all these young people, they took the banner, and instead of leaving the picture of whatever they picked that their group was, that's where they started posting the important, phone numbers, and then there's a pinned post, which on phones you don't even see this. So they're all talking about this pinned post, and I didn't see it for months and months and months. So you could list on the pin post the important numbers like, please call 911 only for emergencies. I actually saw people asking, can I call 911 to find out when they're going to plow the corner back? Those are the things you don't want to tie 911 up with. But people don't all know, new people to the town, they don't know about the non-emergency 698-3800 number and the storm event line, the 898-4900. I had a typo the other night. So it'd be really great on the town's website as well as these pages because people are just going in circles about that. And just two other quick points. The Massachusetts Consumer Protection announcement just came out this afternoon that there's no law in Massachusetts, there is in Tennessee, unfortunately, not in Mass, regarding gouging by snow and ice dam removal companies. And I really want to stress that some of the old Milton kids who are now in their 30s advised me that people really shouldn't be paying over $1,000 a roof. One of my neighbors, an elderly woman, called up to check with us. They wanted $3,000. One person was quoted $1,000. The next week, 7 days later, they had to pay $2,000. So I wanted to get that on air tonight only because it's showing up on the social media. So they can go out with a shovel, they don't have to have insurance, and they can charge whatever they want. It just made the news at about 5 o'clock. It was like a breaking news item. Another big thing that I'm picking up on with calls is some people don't want to put in claims on their homes, and they're thinking, oh, the premiums are going to go up. This is a state of emergency. You can't have your insurance canceled for it. But I would just recommend that we try to put out there on our pages, or the town's pages, get 3 quotes from a contractor, get 3 referrals. You know, so often in situations where there's an emergency, you could end up with a house where you hired somebody and he doesn't finish the job. There is a question that I know you're not going to answer, but I'd like you to keep it in mind as we move forward, because it is still snowing these days, regarding, I've never seen it done in Milton, but at Command Central. I really believe that communications and organization can really calm people down during an emergency, and there's obviously a lot of upset people. So we also want to share that there are many volunteers available. We do obviously have to be careful with liability, but there are people who could answer the phone. I know the storm line, I don't think there's anyone answering it, just the voicemail. And even if you just let people know, we got your message, you know, we can't call you back because we're out plowing, which is where they should be. But there are volunteers that would gladly answer phones. There are volunteers asking, they want to clear hydrants, that's already happening. And there are volunteers who want to cook food and deliver food, because some of the elderly still don't have, I got a call today, someone still didn't have a second means of egress. So I think I covered everything I've been
You covered a lot, and we're going to have
watching.
our public safety personnel here, so I think we might even cover
Great.
possibly some of these topics.
Thank
So,
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
There was one other person who wanted to speak.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, Brendan.
Hello, good evening. My name is Brendan McGrath. I'm a resident on Randolph Avenue, number 675.
Good evening.
I'm an abutter to the parcel of land that is intended for the development of the 40B project, and I'm not sure what the scope of the agenda item is tonight on the access via the DPW yard, but I'm a chemical engineer. I've worked a lot in loss prevention, etc. matters. I know a lot about, you know, fire safety, fire science, etc. But well, it's a technical question perhaps, but opening up an access, an emergency access via the DPW yard will constitute the need to keep that space, obviously, between the access gate and the main gate of the DPW yard constantly free of snow, vehicles. It will essentially reduce the available area to the DPW yard if we're depending on that access road for an emergency scenario to allow the safe evacuation of 1, 2, 3, 4 fire appliances that may be needed, or ambulances, etc., going in there. So I guess I still have concerns as a neighbour about flood risk, etc., to my property. Recent heavy rainstorms did show that that's a scenario, and I still firmly believe that this development could aggravate that. So, thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Brendan.
But we'll get to that more when we take up that agenda item, but it's for temporary one-time access for limited purpose, but we will talk more about that. It sounds like there might be some confusion about what that request is. Is there anyone else tonight for citizen speak before we go on to our public safety? Okay, then, if not, Joe Lynch is our DPW director, and Joe Prondak is our building commissioner, and if both of them would come up and join us at the table. I know Joe needs to be downstairs at the warrant committee probably 10 minutes ago, but, so we'll try to cover this fairly quickly, but thank you both for coming in tonight and for being here.
Well, good evening.
Hey, Joel.
Good evening.
Hello, I apologize for my look, but I literally just came in from the field. I thought I'd have a chance to change and didn't.
Well, I think we should just start by, the board should thank you and all of your staff, and all of your contractors and your volunteers, anyone who's working with you. The past 3 weeks have really been just an incredible experience. I don't think people realize the DPW workers in particular have been out in frigid weather, knees deep in snow, knees deep in rain. There was a sewage break in East Milton Square in the middle of a cleanup operation over there, and they were knees deep in sewage. So this has been just an incredible period of time for the Public Works, Police, Fire, Consolidated Facilities, for Joe and his team in the inspectional services. So thank you very much on behalf of the board and the town for everything that you're doing. We know that there are issues in some places, but there's been a lot of good news in other areas, and Joe's going to give us an update.
Sure. And Katie, if you don't mind, I'd like to make one acknowledgement, is Brian Carlisle, my operations director. He's a salary employee, and I'm not going to get into union scale or anything else, but Brian is a salaried employee who was literally working 90 hours a week and working on about 3 to 4 hours of sleep at best every night for the past 3.5 weeks. He's out there constantly with our crews, with the volunteer crews, with the mutual aid service people that we have coming in from all parts of the Northeast, and I'll give you an example of that. But, I really, really want to extend my thanks to Brian, because, with his buffer, if you will, between pure management as myself and the operations guys. I mean, I get to be an operations guy only during snowstorms. Brian does it every day. Brian holds the team together, and when a citizen gets in somebody's face, it's in Brian's face, and we're all wearing thin. I want everybody to remember that on August 22nd, the high temperature was 93 degrees, and we were all complaining. So, so it's all put it in perspective and keep it where it is, that we'll be back worrying about, the heat and the drought and the summer. Just give you a quick synopsis, is we had that first blizzard that hit on 26th and 27th of January. That was the blizzard, as they called it, Juno. By comparison, it wasn't a heck of a lot larger than what we've got these 2 subsequent storms since. So they've been going nonstop, really and truly, from a cleanup operation from the very first big storm on the end of January till now. So that's almost a full month of nonstop snow fighting. It is, in fact, unprecedented. To the point that we've been working with crews since last Thursday from Air National Guard, Army National Guard, New York Department of Transportation, Pennsylvania Turnpike Authority, Maryland Department of Transportation, the Bureau of Prisons, all working with cleaning out hydrants, widening roadways, prepping snow farms, clearing back corners, and mostly widening street. We're working from a triage perspective. I mentioned that last Thursday when we met, when you folks made the emergency declaration so we could tap into those assets officially. Our triage has to be prioritized. It's an obligation under the MEMA Emergency Management Plan that we have. There are, in fact, smaller, localized neighborhoods that, in the eyes of the federal disaster, are not eligible for us to go in and do. And we have to work on those arterial roads first, collector roads second, neighborhood collectors third, public ways in the neighborhoods, and public dead ends, and then private ways last. And we cannot use these emergency assets in private ways. So it's very, Milton's unique that we maintain private ways at all. Most communities don't. In fact, there's a school of thought that we ought not to, legally, but nonetheless, the town decided to do that, a decade ago and pledged to it. So we do. We have had some great progress in getting, I can say that all of the arterials are fully open, accessible. Most of the collector neighborhoods can get fire apparatus through them. From there, they can pull into the smaller neighborhoods. That is MEMA, as we speak, calling me and probably deploying tomorrow's assets to us.
Take it.
Actually, I do need to take that.
Okay, go ahead.
Let Joe do his roof thing.
All right.
Good evening.
Evening, Joe, and thank you to you and your team as well.
Yeah, fortunately, to
That's good.
this point, we haven't had a lot of activity as far as actual roof collapses. I think it is roof collapses are not something that we deal with every day, or the weight of snow, and not even every season. So it's kind of a unique event. But the good thing is that it is well publicized. In prior years, the media has been all over it. They're all over it this time. So a lot of people are aware, but there are some things to be certainly leery of. As Ms. D'Agostino pointed out, it is a good opportunity for people to gouge. And there's no pool, so to speak, of reputable contractors for this, because it's just not a common event. So to that subject, I mean, I think it's just best that people, get references, make sure you're checking out these contractors as much as possible before you hire them. We did, part of our focus this week was on, and last week too, was on the public schools, and we did evaluate those, Bill Ritchie and myself. And the fortunate part of it is that the snow has been fairly light to date. And the high winds that we've seen seems to have taken a lot of the snow off of the wide expanse flat roofs. Where we're seeing trouble is where you have uneven roof lines and different heights of roofs butting up against one another, as we're seeing drifting snow. So Bill Ritchie and I made an evaluation yesterday, and a determination that the high schools seem to be particularly affected because it's got a lot of irregular shapes. So we came to a conclusion that any drifts that were approaching 5 to 6 feet would be removed or cut down, and then any wider areas that had 4 feet of snow on it or more would be removed or cut down. The thought behind that, although we really didn't see any need currently, an immediate concern that we were in trouble in any way, we felt that moving the lighter snow now would be easier than if we get some melting and some rain. It's going to make all that snow heavier and hard to remove if we come into that occasion. So Bill's working on that as we speak. He's assembled some crews. For him, it was impossible to get any reputable contractor in to take on this task, so he's doing it mostly in-house. I've sent out, so not only from my perspective, it's not just the public schools, but we have Fontpont Academy, Milton Academy, Thatcher Montessori, Delphi Academy, several independent daycares. So I've sent out emails to a lot of most of those agencies that we could think of and find an email address for. The Commonwealth has a public safety advisory on the Board of the Department of Public Safety Board of Building Regulations and Standards. This is an advisory on what to do with roof. I have several copies of that that I can pass out for you guys. FEMA also has a good guidance document that's called P957, if anybody wanted to go on the FEMA website and Google that. The one thing that I would like to add that I haven't heard much talked about in the media and throughout any of the recommendations I've seen, and I think people should really be aware of, everybody's saying go out and get some roof rakes, pull that snow off your roof wherever you can, and that's certainly a good idea. But what people need to be especially cognizant of is where the electric service comes into your house. And if you have a metal pole in your hand and you're trying to manipulate some significant amount of snow and you're anywhere near the wires that come into your house, you run a tremendous risk of accidental shock. And I just think that people should be aware of that. I've been trying to spread that word as best I can. So that's a
good point to bring out. Could you also, Joe, speak a little bit to, just generally, for the benefit of the viewers who are watching, because there's some people who, like me, have never had water come in through an ice dam on a house before, but are now experiencing that, and there's a lot of people in town who are in that same position. Could you just talk a little bit about how that happens, what you should check for, how do you notice it, and what should you do?
Well, once you have it, it's hard to get rid of. I just heard an ad on the radio the other day for some company that does some sort of steam removal of ice dams. I don't know if that's a legitimate method or not. Once it's occurred, we just got to wait for the thaw. There really is no proven method of removing an ice dam once it's happened. Once the ice dam is gone and we get into the nicer weather, it's important to tighten up the insulation at the eaves of the house where where the attic insulation meets the roof of the house. It's a particularly difficult area to insulate. It has been for years. It's something that really, if we could pay more attention to and I'll go as far as to say regulate a little more stringently, we would have less of that. So it would be good for people who have serious ice dam issues now in the springtime to talk to a good insulation contractor and talk about keeping the heat inside the house where the roof eaves meet the ceiling. And insulation will do that and will help tremendously in preventing that down the road. Other factors can contribute to that are just unavoidable. Some houses are always going to get ice dams, but there's certainly some steps.
So one sign of it is if the icicles start turning a color, that means that the water has gotten into the walls, and it's the wall turning the color, is what I've been told by a couple of the town officials at one of our emergency meetings.
Sometimes it could be just getting into the overhangs, though, which is not as bad as getting into the house. So inside the enclosed overhang on the house, there's a lot of built-up dirt. So if the water gets in there and then leaks out, runs down the side of the house, it's a brown stain, a brown-colored icicle. So it's not always getting into the house, but certainly it's getting into, it's a sign that it is getting under the roof shingles and into the lower eaves of the roof.
Now, apparently, Joe, some of the more modern methods of roofing has some, rather than tar paper, they put a membrane kind of thing.
Ice and water shield.
Yeah.
If it's installed properly, it can be a tremendous help. It's not the panacea, though. If it were, then we would simply eliminate roof shingles and just do all our roofs in ice and water shield.
Right.
But it is required now on new roofs that you do 3 feet up from the edges when you re-roof.
Right. And if you're going to be re-roof, you might even want to go further than that, depending upon what
Yeah,
you're doing.
I just did it on my own house. I had the ice and water shield, the whole thing. So it's a helpful product, but for those who are already into it, already into the ice damming situation.
I guess the other thing that's a concern is if we do get rain on Sunday and you have ice dams there, that's just going to back up all that water and then freeze it on your roof.
Yep.
Which is going to add weight and...
Yes, yeah, which is why it's important and to try and get as much snow off as possible. Even if you think you don't have an issue right now, dynamics could change as you know, the weather gets warmer, we get that wintry mix or a wetter snow.
And the other thing I've heard too is if you can, even if you can't clear the whole ice dam, at least try and get some channels.
Yes, yes, that's a practice that's more common on commercial roofs. On a large expanse commercial flat roof, engineers will recommend that you clear channels so that you're not creating a tremendous unbalanced load. So as you remove the snow, you're taking it off in an even keel. So,
or even channels in the ice dam, if you can, you know.
Oh, yeah, if that's possible,
water,
yeah. Yep. So we did have a collapse on Mark Lane of the pool house. I think many people.
I saw the picture.
Was fortunate. Nobody was hurt. We had a house on Hilltop yesterday where a woman called me. She's not a single mother, but her husband lives in Florida for health reasons. She has 2 children. She woke up in the morning to find a substantial crack in her dining room ceiling. She called Home Depot, and Home Depot told her it was only water. The fire department, she then called the fire department. They came up and correctly said call the building inspector. So I went up, Mr. Jay Bollier and myself, we went up and looked at it. And there is a substantial crack in her ceiling on her first floor. It's a split-level home, probably built in the 60s. I went up into the attic to where I could see the roof structure. A lot of the homes, a lot of the split levels and the homes built in the 50s, 60s, 70s are what I see as particularly vulnerable. We were, in that era, we didn't have a uniform state building code. We were looking to cut costs on construction of those homes. So, and one other thing I think people should shy away from is to say, well, my house stood up through 1978, therefore it's going to be good through this one. wind has a big effect on where snow lands on your roof, and the dynamics of that storm are totally different from what we've experienced on this storm. So I guess to kind of wrap up, remove as much snow as you can yourself safely. Be careful in hiring outside people. I think the best people to contact initially would be roofing companies, would be the most well-equipped. Hard to get now. A lot of them are just straight out doing this. But try to stick initially with people who are in the contracting business and have a reputation established in that business at least. I think would be a good start.
And the time to call an insurance company is now when the problem is happening, but it sounds like the remedy might not be until the thaw happens, in some cases.
For the ice dams, yeah.
Ice dams.
The ice dams won't be until the fall. The woman on Hilltop Street, we recommended that she not stay in her house because she was at risk for collapse. Her insurance company did tell her that they would pay to put her in a hotel. So she chose to go that route, and she's working to get somebody to clear that roof.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe, and let's go back to Joe Lynch for an update on the cleanup.
Sure. Thank you for letting me take that phone call. I do have an update. MEMA has confirmed that we were having 5 backhoes and 5 dump trucks from the Pennsylvania Turnpike Authority tomorrow morning for a full 12-hour shift. 1 front-end loader from the Maryland Department of Transportation for a 12-hour shift. And all National Guard personnel have been shifted to the MBTA, so we will not be seeing any hydrant digging crews until further notice. We need to get the train lines up and running again. So that's the update from them. So we talked about prioritization, we talked about the progress we're making, we're going to continue to plow away with, regardless of these outside assets, we're still working it with our full complement of our own employees and our contract employees. We are spending some serious money in fighting these storms, and I think, everybody's probably afraid to ask, and I'm afraid to say, but I will, that I believe, to date, right up to where we are now, we have paid out and spent $421,000 and change, $421,500, call it, in change. Remember, we budget $150,000 for snow removal.
Does that include the overtime?
That's complete. That's what we have paid out. Now, what we really still have is we still have about $30,000 in payroll that hasn't hit that balance yet, still outstanding. That's mostly overtime. We have about $200,000 in contracted billings that haven't been received, some that are in process that haven't been paid, and some additional that haven't even been submitted yet. So it's about $200,000 estimate there. And we have salt orders that have been delivered but not yet billed or paid of about $20,000. So we have about $250,000 in additional costs pending, bringing us up to, call it $671 for the year, with 3 inches of snow predicted throughout the day tomorrow, and another big storm this weekend. Whether it's rain or snow, we don't know yet. And quite frankly, I went to bed wrestling with the thought, I really and truly want snow. We have rain right now. The flooding will be devastating. We need a much more gradual melt-off, and we will find a way to deal with the snow. Rain at this point, never mind the roof collapses, which would be catastrophic. The impact on flooding neighborhoods and basements, just people with snow next to their houses would just be unbelievable. It would be awful. So we do have a big storm coming this weekend, and we continue to track it. We will know more about temperature gradients come latter part of tomorrow night. We'll be knowing most certainly on Friday. But we do know it's an event that's coming right across. It's not a nor'easter. There is no coastal effect. This is just a big front moving right across the country. It'll be a fast mover. It's about a 24-hour storm as opposed to these 30, 36-hour, 48-hour storms we've been getting. So the bad number is 671 as we sit right now with more, still spending. Yeah. I mean, right now we're out doing snow operations. We have an overnight clearing. That's another $30,000 just tonight.
Right, and we're still not in March yet either.
Right.
Still not in March.
No.
Yeah, but I used to say that, but really March is only 2 weeks away, and
Yeah.
I don't see the end yet.
Yeah.
I do want to, I don't want to get too sappy, and I don't want to, try to politicize anything. But the truth is, There's an awful lot of impatience, an awful lot of criticism, but there's a world of appreciation and expressed in so many different ways. The kind words, the thank you notes that we're getting, the drop-off of boxes of coffee and pastries and more meals. Actually, we've never eaten better. I shouldn't say better. We've never eaten more. Some of us is very, very good, but the people are fabulous. You know, as the weather has improved and they still see us out there working, they're bringing things by. I won't embarrass anybody, but the people have been very benevolent in many different ways. And that keeps our guys going. It keeps our spirits up. You know, we heard some criticisms earlier this evening. For those, there are hundreds of thankses out there. And that's what keeps the guys, and men and women, not guys, men and women of this operation going.
Good.
Folks who've worked with us from Pennsylvania Turnpike and New York DOT were in Buffalo, and they said, we are nothing compared to Buffalo. We are much worse than what Buffalo had in the early part of the year. They were deployed there for a week.
Wow. And local businesses are impacted too, so it would be nice if once we start having more clearing and the weather's a little bit better and people can get around a little
Support your
more, and there's
local
more
merchants,
parking
yeah.
in the square and elsewhere, if we can get people to go out and continue supporting local businesses, that would be a good thing.
And then tonight's operation is exactly that. It's a repeat of what we did a couple weeks ago. We're out in the business. We did one last night. We're doing so much now. We're doing it again tonight. And that's to get those businesses back up and opening full capacity so they can thrive and, help.
So right now,
contribute.
we're still on the emergency arteries and
Right.
start clearing.
Well, those
things.
businesses are in fact emergency
Right.
arteries. So we're looking, it's Adams Street, it's
Sure.
both ends of Adams Street. It's Elliott Street and Central Avenue. Central Avenue's pretty much done
But we
already.
really haven't gotten to the side streets all that much yet? or-
Oh, no, we have. We've been quite well into it. Most of the DOT, the Pennsylvania Turnpike folks were in what we call the Audubon Flats area.
Okay.
All those
Yeah.
main collectors, the Warrens, the Houstons, the main drags that cut straight across. We were in East Milton today. We did
Good.
Franklin, Church, and Howe. Not Church, Franklin and Howe. Tonight, we're doing Church and Emerson. So those are two in each direction, major backbones serving those collected neighborhoods.
So replowing and removing?
Widening, we're not with snow blower, really just running the gutter, reclaiming 8 feet and blowing snow into people's, side yards and front yards, and, trying not to fill in driveways and trying not to fill in sidewalks, but inevitably we're causing some of that. But in the, by comparison of having to reshovel the walk to your front door, I can tell you the fire apparatus is gonna get through without encountering a head-on car.
Well, I can tell you, from my own perspective, just misery likes company, I guess, but, the way my driveway is situated, the plow comes in, and it has no place to put the snow, and it plows it into my turnoff. So I have to either hand shovel the turnoff 6 feet high. I've done it 3 times now. It's getting old.
And, it just happens to be Joe and I sitting at the table here this evening, but, Jack Ray can attest to the fact that he and I became 4 o'clock in the morning buddies for the past week now, where I get the call from Meemer that the guys are on their way, and I'm calling him to make sure that we've got his support from his firefighters to handle these hydrant crews. Once I get the Air National Guard or the Army National Guard folks in, I just pass them right off to the fire department. They work in great concert with each other. Police department, the same deal, be coordinating our traffic details and make sure that, we can get traffic control while we're doing these operations. At night, it's not much of an issue, but during the day, it's quite an issue.
Joe, what about the area off of Upper Randolph Ave where, Sassamon, Eager, Nahanton, all the streets, there's people pulling out of those onto Randolph, the cars flying by on Randolph. We've gotten some inquiries up there. Is there a way we can get those big snowbanks lowered so that
The
there's
answer is
better
yes.
Visibility?
That's DOT roadway, that's a state roadway. They have said that they were going to do it, they've done it in the past 2 storms, they haven't done it yet. So, our hopes are still that they're going to get out there and do that, but if they don't, we will. The roads themselves are safe enough, but it's the nosing out.
Out into it,
And I
yeah.
think, just as a word of caution to all the folks at home watching this, and those who may be out there driving, is that, we're Massachusetts drivers, we're not the most patient people, we know that. But in this particular instance, you've got to assume that when you're edging out, that there's someone coming the other way, and you've got to use the utmost of care. It's a lot easier driving at night when you see the headlights coming on. During the day, you don't have the benefit of seeing those headlights in advance. So you've got to use an abundance of care. Monday, when school starts back, it's going to be imperative when the kids are going to be, trying to navigate at the same time the commuters are trying to navigate the roads. But that's exactly the concentration is pushing back these corners, and we haven't even gotten into sidewalks yet, but the goal is to get the sidewalks open in time for school to open on Monday.
Well, if the state doesn't take care of that, I think if we could go out and try to get that done, if it's possible, by the end of this week.
That's correct. Oh, yeah, we have it on our radar.
It's the snowbanks
In the hopes that they're going to come, we're letting that happen, well, because we're still busy with other stuff.
Okay.
When they don't, we are going to get it. We will get it. There's no doubt on that.
Anyone else, any comments?
I want to go to Joe for a second. With the schools, Joe, the solar panels?
Yep.
How does that, with the structural integrity of all the roofs on our schools? Because some parents are inquiring, are roofs sufficient to hold all the snow and the solar panels?
Yeah, the solar panels themselves are fairly light, and it's an even
It's the
load
concrete holding them down.
distributed over, yeah, but they're individual blocks. And the solar panels are located on most of the wider, flatter roofs that we have, except that we've had the benefit of the wind taken, so we don't have a lot of excess accumulation on those areas right now. So we are watching them, and again, our bigger concern was with the drifts.
Do you think you should hire a structural engineer just to determine it?
I don't think it's necessary at this point. I think the end result of a structural engineer, no matter who you hire, is they're just going to say shovel them to cover their, It would be hard for a structural engineer. That's kind of the dilemma of hiring a structural engineer. Is it's going to be hard for any structural engineer to tell us anything but shovel the roofs, because then they become liable for it.
Well, they could determine if there's any buckling or...
Yeah, it would be a major, they'd have to take samples of the snow and determine the weight of it, and then they'd have to review the plans of all the buildings and determine, are they adequate to support the weight of the snow that we currently have. The snow, in generally speaking, the roofs are designed to hold 45 pounds per square foot. And in that design, there's a factor of safety as well. So I think it's pretty safe to say that they're upwards of 45 pounds per square foot. So
you're pretty confident?
We've taken, Bill and I, although not structural engineers, have, we've focused on that quite a bit. And at this point, we're fairly confident. We still have to pay attention, though, because we don't know what's coming, for sure. And that's going to be the key thing. We have to keep an eye on what's coming.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, well, the town administrator and I were just conferring about the agenda. We've got a number of people waiting here for certain topics, so we're going to try to cover what we can while other people are waiting. So, Joe Prondick, I think we can let you go, but Joe Lynch, if you could stay for a few more minutes, we're going to move to number 15, which is the H&W apartment access request, and we'll cover that while we've got a couple of people here. So, if everyone could, thank you very much, Joe.
Good job. What's that?
All right, so let's, with the board's agreement, we'll go on to number 15, which is a request from H&W Apartments, which is the proposed developer of the 40B proposal at Randolph Avenue. And this is a request, I just want to pull it up. I think from the comments at Citizen Speak, there may be some concern among neighbors that this is a bigger request than what it actually is. This is a request, and Joe can speak to this probably better than I can, but it's a request for just a limited purpose of soil testing. It's not for permanent access to the site. So because we have the 40B application pending, the town has filed certain comments, including comments from our DPW director, Joe Lynch. Soil testing needs to be done in order to respond to the comments that the DPW raised in the 40B process. And this is a request so that wetlands do not have to be damaged by going in through the Meg Lane area over from Randolph Ave. The request is to come in from the Department of Public Works yard in order to do this testing. So, Joe, maybe you could give us a little more detail on this.
Yeah, you summarized it very, very well. I was listening to Citizen Speak, and I felt as though that it was being construed to be some sort of a permanent driveway, some roadway, some sort of permanent access or right-of-way. When in reality is their stormwater system is designed in such a way to collect water from the roofs and the parking areas and get them into storage cisterns, if you will, and then infiltrate some of that water into the ground And given the terrain of the land, some of those profiles of where the soils are going to be asked to receive these waters are at great depths. So to go in there and analyze the stormwater, you need to know what that soil characteristic is, where it is they intend to infiltrate. So in those instances, they need to get a machine in there that to do a boring, drill it down into the ground, pull up the soil, and be able to analyze it in order to calculate the stormwater management. And what they're faced with is to get a piece of equipment in there in order to conduct those tests. A couple of days. They could come in, make lane, but in order to do that, they would have to drive through the wetland, disturb the wetland, do some damage. If the project were not to be approved, you have that damage that's there, and quite frankly, soil exploration is an allowed activity in the Wetlands Protection Act, but they want to do the right thing and not go through the wetland when in fact there is another alternative way. They just need to peel back one section of our fence. It's in an area where you have to revisit it. 2 weeks ago, it was in an area where it was not going to operate, function within our operational envelope. But nowadays, we have stuff everywhere, including equipment from other states. But I believe that it's in an area where they could pull it out, get up their access up into the woods, not be in any of the wetlands, not have to cut any trees down, conduct their tests, get it, and come back out a couple of days later and do their analysis and repair the fence. That's all this is that they're asking for. They've asked that of me. I recognize the controversy of that. I also recognize that site is where I work. It's not my site, it's your site. And who am I to give that permission? You know, I understand the request, I forwarded it along, and I can say it doesn't impact my operations when they do this testing. And that's what they're asking of you guys.
Can I ask, does Joe have the authorization to make that decision? I mean, I'm glad you came to the Board of Selectmen, but my question is, does he have the authorization without coming to the board?
He may.
I'm not sure.
He may. I guess we could ask town council for, a more formal view on that, but it's the DPW yard. The DPW is under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. It sounds like Joe's bringing the request to us because it's related to a 40B project that a lot of the abutters and the neighbors have a lot of interest in. And we, as the Board of Selectmen, and with our department heads, including Joe, have submitted written comments raising concerns about the scope and we don't need to rehash all the issues, but we've raised a lot of issues about the particular development proposal that, and one of them is stormwater, which Joe is